6:31. It is Tuesday, April 14th, 2026. This is the meeting of the City Council Workshop for the City of Lake Elmo. We are now in order. First item on the agenda, as Mayor Cadenhead is not here to celebrate his birthday with us, you can all sing in your heads happy birthday to him later, but broadband franchise discussion. Mr. Michael Bradley. Oh.
I'm not Mike Bradley. I'm Mary Klein, the production and content manager for Suburban Community Channels. I have been with SCC for as long as we've been using beta tapes. And for those of you who don't know what beta tapes are, it means I've been with the organization for a very long time. But the reason that I've invested so much of my career into community television is my steadfast belief in it. It is a unique gem unlike any other medium. And during my time at SCC, I have seen Lake Elmo's growth just explode. And all along the way, we've served as a partner to keep you connected to your community. I know some of you in this room, but those of you who do not know me or know what we do, I'm going to show a brief video, and then I'm going to touch on some of the points. SCC, or the Ramsey-Washington Suburban Cable Commission, is part of a joint powers agreement with 9 member cities. Obviously, they're listed here, Lake Elmo included. We are a small but committed staff. We have just 3 full-time employees, me being one of them, and we rely primarily on 2 part-time employees, our production and technology specialist. We also have an AV IT consultant, and we use cable casters and freelancers. Our master control manages the cablecast system that brings your meetings to your residents. We have the cablecaster that's here in the chamber. That cablecaster works with, that's Kenny there waving, that cablecaster works with a person who's always on duty during live meetings at SCC, to make sure that there's a signal, to make sure that the live stream is going, and to make sure that it's recorded. SCC hires and schedules the cablecasters. We provide technical support for your chamber. So if something goes wrong in the control room or here in the chamber, we help provide troubleshooting for those issues. We manage your video on demand and channel playback. As I showed in the video, Lake Elmo, we facilitate about 58 meetings a year, which is 80 hours of content. And overall, for our 9 member cities, we usually cover just under 250 meetings. The Cable Commission provides expertise and decades of expertise in administration of cable franchising, decades of experience managing public rights-of-way. We act to ensure equitable rates and customer service. So here's an example. Just last week, it was after hours, and a gentleman was knocking on our office door, and I went to speak with him, and it was a Comcast customer who was frustrated because his internet, cable, and telephone services had gone down. Well, I had just learned shortly before that inadvertently a fiber was cut. So I was able to explain to him what happened, what steps were being taken to restore his services. And, sometimes people just like a face to talk to or a person. Now, typically, customers will call our business manager, Cindy Arco, but people do show up at the commission from time to time. When fibers get inadvertently cut, we also help restore the connections to our city halls. We also develop and promote award-winning content, and we have worked with for decades with Mike Bradley.
That's the best one. That's the best part of the slide.
Indeed. SCC also provides coverage of your community events. So congratulations, last year you had your centennial celebration. We produced a promotional video ahead of that celebration. We also covered the event. We covered Light Up Lake Elmo. We cover your community meetings, so your water information meetings, crime prevention, we cover those. He's not here tonight, but Mayor Cadenhead and I had several years back, we did a profile. It rained the entire time, but it did not dampen the experience because it was so much fun getting to know him and getting to know his perspective of the city. People love to know their local officials, and this is a way for them to get to know city officials they might not otherwise. We do business features. So during COVID, I reached out to Lake Elmo's business community. How can we help you? We did several stories on businesses who shared their unique challenges, how the community could help and how they were helping. We produced candidate forums, again, to promote civic engagement and keep your residents informed. We also produce recruitment videos for city departments and city services. And as I mentioned in the video, much of this is award-winning content. The commission is funded through 5% cable franchise fees, 2.75 PEG fees, but people are consuming their content differently. We've seen a 43% decrease in revenue, and we simply need to modernize our funding model. I hope to continue bringing Lake Elmo and all our member cities all these services. You continue to grow, we want to grow with you, and I just hope that we keep it not only local, but hyper-local. And Mike Bradley is I'm gonna let him speak here, but I do love to hear feedback, good, constructive criticism. If you have story ideas, if you want us to schedule something, please, I love to hear from people. I put some business cards back there, but please reach out. This is how you can see our content and of course on your city channel as well. So thank you again for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mary? We'll save them. Thank you, Ms. Klein. And Mr. Bradley.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me back. You might recall I was here a couple of months ago to talk about broadband franchising. I did bring a few slides just to give you a little bit more information on that. And thank you for that. I think Mary did a nice job really at the end there, especially of talking about what's happening in the franchising world when it comes to franchise fees generated by the operators using your public right-of-way. And with cable television, they're obviously going down, and going down significantly. When I saw 43%, that's a significant drop in what used to be a fairly static revenue source for the city and for the commission and SCCTV. I want to talk now about, when we talk about the future of franchising for local governments. In my view, the future of franchising really is in broadband. And it's really easy to see. When we talk to our kids or maybe for some of us, grandchildren. When we talk to them about what they want to see, they're not interested in what's on cable television necessarily anymore, right? What do they want? They want to know what the internet situation is. What's the Wi-Fi? What's the Wi-Fi password? That's the future. I think there's no question about that.
No commercials on the internet.
Right. Oh, with my kids, they have zero tolerance for commercials of any kind, whether it's on the radio, but there's no such thing as a radio anymore either for them. It's all Spotify or whatever, and the same thing with television. It's funny. It's funny for those of us that can remember, I can still remember commercial slogans and jingles and all that kind of stuff, but yeah, kids don't want that. But anyway, I did want to share with you, what we did, recently in South Washington County as far as the first broadband franchise in the state. Wanted to point out just a few benefits. As you can see, there's actually 2 slides on benefits because there's so many benefits from broadband franchising. I'm just going to mention just a handful of them, if that's all right with you. The first is making sure that everyone in your city has equal access to the same quality of service of broadband. So when you franchise a company, you're going to make sure that that they provide the same quality of service across the entire footprint. There's not little spots of good, bad, and real bad, okay? The other one is the build-out of the city, requiring a reasonable build-out of your city over a period of time. So in the case of South Washington County, your neighboring commission, they negotiate a 5-year build-out by the broadband company. They also negotiated some public benefits. So they negotiated internet service for local government buildings, as well as some dark fiber connections.
What is dark fiber?
Dark fiber is fiber that's not lit, meaning it's up to the city to get service over that wire. So it's a connection without the internet service.
And would that be like in future development areas? Is that where they?
No, it was for the city itself.
Oh, okay.
So I don't recall the type of building. Let's say it's a public works building, okay? We're building a new public works building on the outskirts of town. We want that building served. It's not presently served with anything yet. And so we have this agreement that that line is going to be constructed, and then that can connect into the city network.
Okay.
Once it's done.
Once it's done.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Good. Some of the other things is we negotiated customer service provisions. Now, Mary just was telling you about how she helps residents get relief when they can't get answers that they need from the operator, and in that case, the cable television operator, because they have a cable television franchise. But now if you have a broadband company here and you have a neighbor who can't get through on a billing issue or there's a connectivity issue, where do they call besides the 800 stand in line number? Who do they call? Then there's really nobody to call. There's nobody, so the state doesn't handle it, right? The FCC doesn't handle it. Who handles it? If you have a franchise, you handle it, or Mary handles it for you, actually. And that's part of the benefit of being in the commission. So it's important to have those customer service provisions. How quickly are people going to get service delivered to them? How quickly are issues going to be resolved? Those types of things.
Can you say more on that when you say who handles it? We handle it. In other words, each city then uses its staff because it has the franchise and the wires are in a right-of-way that are under contracts, therefore the city is
Yeah, the local
responsible.
franchising authority handles it. That's, in your case, that's your commission. They handle the complaints from the entire area for their 9 cities.
And then does the franchise agreement then call out who repairs, like which staff are responsible for going out and making that repair? Because it,
Well, it doesn't get into that kind of detail, but it does require the franchisee to provide information to the city and the commission on who we can contact to to make sure
Alright.
that we get relief. So we have a local person that we can contact.
Because potentially it could be a third party, it could be a crew that specializes in that, but it's not Comcast, it's not X company that,
Right, well, it'll be somebody through the franchised company,
okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Can I just jump off that real quick too? So.
for sure.
So if more cities end up doing this and franchising and then there are more customer service calls for the SEC, does the SEC envision them having to expand workforce to take on more of this customer service? Or do you think the volume from previous experiences where you're handling customer service, that the volume actually isn't going to increase that much anyways?
I was gonna say, you know, it's an unknown
Yeah.
factor, but I mean, if it got to the point where it required more, then we'd have to investigate, you know.
Yeah,
investigate.
and because you do the customer service currently, and do you get a lot of calls, or are they usually able to handle it at the company level before having to, figure out, okay, I'm not getting the answer I need here, I need to talk to my cable commission?
Yeah, usually we're able to manage it or at least point them in the right direction. And
Ms. Clyde, can you go to the
Oh, yeah,
microphone?
sorry, I
Yeah,
should
yeah.
ask. I'm sorry.
The cable commission would like to hear your voice.
yes, so typically we are able to handle the volume, and if we can't handle the issue ourselves, we can point them in the right direction. Currently, it's been a manageable scenario thus far, but, you know, if
Oh, 9
it
cities jump out on
required,
you.
yeah, if it required more, then we'd have to look into more, but
Okay.
it's kind of, like I said, an unknown
At this
variable
point.
right now, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank
We're
you.
getting inundated with calls. That's telling us there's a larger problem,
Sure.
right?
Okay.
And we're able to deal with those larger problems too, through franchising, because we have penalty provisions.
Okay.
And then we provide notice that the franchisee is not complying with the franchise. There'll be a per-day penalty.
And does that have pretty good teeth too, where it can
It does.
get them to
Oh, yeah.
move?
They
Okay.
don't want, yeah, a franchisee does not want a notice of franchise violation.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's worked too, over the years with cable television. So with the cable television franchisees, we're not doing it all the time.
Sure.
But we have done it over the years. And that brings the issue to the forefront, and the issues get resolved.
Yeah, I suppose just knowing that that option is there, they're trying to avoid it, obviously, so, okay.
They for sure want to avoid it. And actually, that was the last benefit on this slide, was the liquidated damages, that's the penalty provision. But wasn't one of the ones I was gonna talk about, but the customer service is important. I think the senior and disabled person discount, is a really nice benefit for your residents, so, those people that are seniors or disabled will get up to 10%, or no less than 10% discount, on their services. So there's a lot of benefits to franchising. And, and just to kind of remind you what a franchise is a really unique document. It's an ordinance and it's a contract. It allows the company the privilege to do business in your city and to occupy your right-of-way, permanently, okay? At least while they're franchised. And allows them to provide services to the residents. And in return, they pay, well, actually, on that last slide, there was another one that I was supposed to go over. Which one did I miss? It was the consideration. And the consideration that we negotiated was a 5% franchise fee. 5% franchise fee is the same that the current cable television operator pays. So that is another significant benefit to the city and to your commission. And when you compare franchising to permitting, there really isn't, there's just no question that franchising is better than permitting. And franchising, by the way, does not eliminate permitting. Okay, it's in addition to permitting. So you'll be continuing to do the permitting, but you'll have this overriding document that has these other benefits for your residents and for your city.
Am I correct to presume because it's not just city right-of-way. We have residents where their driveways and access is on a county right-of-way. We do have some residents where their access is actually on a state highway. So it would still be the city franchise, but it applies to all government right-of-ways?
It's to your local government right-of-way. If they need additional authority from the state or county, they'll have to get that. And we'll still do the permitting, though, because the permitting's in our city. And that doesn't change the consideration that's due. The consideration that's due is franchise fees on all revenue from broadband services.
I guess the example I'm thinking of, and I know we have residents that don't have broadband that are on city streets. What I don't know is, as an example, say, on, the gun range on 10th Street, for those residents who are on the south side, they're on a county road, if they have broadband. I don't know if the residents along Highway 36, there's a couple driveways there, I don't know if they have broadband, but that's where the question
Yeah, and that's something, when we.
with the
When we
build-out.
start, when we start doing the franchising, that's when we can really figure out, what are the needs that we want to address. And we know what the, kind of the big ones are. But these other ones where you're drilling down to specific neighborhoods, it's a perfect time to talk about that with the franchisee, and say, okay, what about this area? And this is an important area that needs to be addressed, hypothetically speaking, as far as what we're talking about here.
I was starting to hear,
No, I was just gonna ask, when you mentioned that they would have to figure out the permitting, then if it was a state or county level
Right.
easement.
It's their
they being
construction,
like
they gotta figure it
Intrepid,
out. Right,
And they being Intrepid or the franchisee.
right.
Okay,
The franchisee, correct. Not your public works department.
got it,
Right,
thank you.
okay. Why are we talking about broadband franchising now? And really, I think I went over this with you before, but there was a significant case that came down called Ohio Telecom versus FCC, and that's where the the Court of Appeals ruled that broadband is an information service, not a telecommunications service. And when that decision came down, we, internally, we were looking at, well, if broadband isn't a telecommunications service, and we know it's not a cable television service, and in federal law, there's kind of three buckets where these services fall. It's information service, it's telecommunications, or cable television. So we know it's not cable television, we know it's not telecommunications. The court ruled that it's in this bucket called information services. But in state law, we don't have a bucket for information services. We have a bucket for telecommunications, and if it's a telecommunications service, then we're prohibited from franchising the company. Okay, we still can permit, but can't franchise. If it's a cable communications system, which in Minnesota law is defined broader than a cable television system, then if you find that broadband is, a broadband system is a cable communication system, then we as cities are required to franchise. Okay? And so that's really where our choices are under state law right now. Telecommunications or a cable communication system. And one you can't franchise, the other one you can. One, there's no benefits really to your residents other than your permitting. The other one, there's lots. And that's your choice as a city on where to fall. So we did this reassessment. In our view, cities have a very good argument that broadband systems are cable communication systems. We know that there's solid case law in the 8th Circuit, probably better case law than anywhere else in the country, frankly, that broadband is an information service and that the edge services provided over the system are also broadband information services. What I mean by that is they'll offer, a lot of these companies will offer broadband internet access, but they'll also offer a product called Voice over Internet Protocol, VoIP service. And under precedent in the 8th Circuit, those services like VoIP are also information services. They're not telecommunication services. And it gets a little bit confusing, right? Because sometimes it's voice and you think phone, you think telephone. That's not the way it's not the way the cases hold in this area. Yeah.
Mike, if these are not telecommunications systems, but information systems, is the franchise fee limited to 5%?
It's not. It's a great question, yeah. The franchise fee limitation for cable television services is in federal law, and it's in that bucket that I call Title VI. And there is an express preemption of local governments. We can't charge more than 5% franchise fee. Here, within the broadband system, cable communication system, Title I, there's almost no regulations affecting broadband systems, and there's no cap. What we did in Woodbury and South Washington County is we just did a balancing of sorts where we thought, okay, you know, maybe we could ask for more than 5%, but it seemed to us to make sense that knowing that this was also going to be passed through to residents, that we charge basically the same franchise fee, even though it's on different services, broadband versus cable television, that it made some sense to go with 5%. Yeah.
And I wasn't suggesting more than 5, I was thinking, I remember 5 being the Telecommunications Act, but I didn't think it applied in this case.
Yep. No, you gotta listen to Nick. He has a lot of experience in this area.
Do you recall when that process was happening for then the city level, when they were dealing with the fees that are collected from that? Were they making decisions to say, hey, we need to set some of this money aside because when they are digging, we're now going to be responsible for moving lines because the franchise agreement says certain duties we have, so we're going to start to build up money for that?
As a city?
Yes. Because I recall we had that conversation, Councilmember Jerry, do you recall that?
Usually in a franchise agreement, they're responsible for moving the lines if you have a public improvement or some other need for them to relocate their line.
So my memory was completely the opposite. Okay, solid.
Yeah, they're generally responsible. They, again, meaning, I'm sorry, I keep saying they, but the provider will be responsible for those costs.
I take back my question.
It's a good question. What other questions do you have?
And did you say Woodbury was kind of the kickoff city for testing this out, and how's that been going? Any roadblocks that were unforeseen?
None so far, really. We just did an amendment to that franchise, but none of that changed what I just shared with you as far as the first broadband franchise. I understand construction is on its way, and I haven't heard if there's service being lit up yet, but it's moving forward.
Okay. And how does, now this is might be a dumb question, but because this is fiber internet we're talking about, correct? So how does
Yes.
that work to get to people's houses? Does the fiber go into the house, or is there just a main line and you have a router in your house, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's kind of a fun question, really. It will work, you know, on the outside. Do you have a house? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on the outside of your house, there's a box, right? Might be by your garage or somewhere
Yeah.
like that. And that's where the phone line comes in. There'll be a box for that. There'll be another box for where the cable line comes in. Maybe on the other side of the house, there'll be a place where the electricity and gas comes in. It'll be similar to that. The cable line or the fiber will be delivered right to your house, and there'll be a demarc place at your house.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
So it was discussed and it was mentioned, 43% drop in revenue, Ms. Klein, for the commission. So in the case when Sawashco did this, did they then put in the franchise agreements how the revenue is then distributed based upon, here's a percent that's going to their cable commission as a substitute for revenue stream? Or how is this solving then the revenue stream decrease that you were just mentioning?
Well, I can speak to that. the franchise fees in that area, all the franchise fees go to the commission. And then they are returned in part to the member cities.
All right.
And it's done through the budgeting process. I think it's also maybe done through their joint powers agreement as well. But it will be an issue that will need to be, continue to be looked at as we enter in kind of to this new generation of franchises.
Are other members of the SCC looking or considering or discussing this?
I've spoken to Oakdale. I think I'll be going back to Oakdale sometime soon about that. You were quick enough to get me to come back a little bit earlier than they did. And I'm not sure where the others are. White Bear is, I think, in the thinking about it stage right now. I can tell you that there's about 20 cities now that have said that they're moving forward with franchising and have started notifying the broadband providers.
So not just considering, doing.
Not just considering, doing, yeah.
All right.
They are doing it. And, I think a reasonable question then is to ask, well, how are the broadband companies reacting to that? Are they just agreeing, for example? And the answer is they're not just agreeing. They are questioning the authority that local governments have to franchise. And so that's a process that's going on right now. And may continue to go on, as we go through the spring and into the summer. Well, I already went over the benefits. What are the risks? I think that's a legitimate question to ask. What are the risks by going into this? I think there's primarily two risks, really. There's one, the risk of possible litigation over the authority of the local government to require a franchise. In our view, we're just following state law. State law says a cable communication system has to get a franchise. We're requiring a franchise, get a franchise. And if they want to bring that to court, okay, fine. We'll have a binding precedent across the entire state of Minnesota that says you got to get a franchise. Fine. When you look at your insurance, I always encourage the local governments that we're working with to look at your insurance coverage to make sure you're covered in the event that litigation was brought. So far, all of the cities that I've worked with have said that they are covered, okay, for that risk. The other risk is that a company decides they're just not going to come. We're just not going to build in your city. Okay, that is another possible risk that you should know of, or at least maybe they'll initially say, because council member so-and-so is requiring a franchise of us, we're not going to come. Okay, that is a risk. So it is good to know the risks. Now, like I said, I went through the benefits. So, and you can say right back, it's like, well, yeah, I did require a franchise. And I want a franchise because I want customer service provisions. I want everybody to be served. I want everybody to have the same quality of service. I want our seniors and disabled folks here to have discounts on their services. Those are all good things. So just know that can be raised.
You mentioned the minimum for that discount is 10%. Is that something that's negotiated in the franchise?
It is, yes.
Is there a max?
No.
Wow. What constitutes disabled? Is that based upon a statutory definition? Because I know we have disabled for property tax purposes. We have, the VA has a certain definition for thresholds.
Yeah, we intentionally left that vague so that we could work that out later. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's a great question, because we thought about it too. How detailed do we get? We chose not to get real detailed. That doesn't mean that a franchise here couldn't be. That's just what we chose there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I just think we should elevate that senior citizen discount.
I second that, yeah.
I mean, Charles just had a birthday today. He might qualify.
Just the last thing I'll mention here, and that's on price impacts, because I think somebody mentioned price impacts and a concern with price impact, because there's a franchise fee. And a couple of things there. The way we handle the franchise fee, and I think the way we would handle it here too, is we allow the company, the franchisee, to pass through the franchise fee to residents, just like the cable operator does, just like XL does for electric and gas. You know, there's probably an argument that we could not allow that, but I think that invites litigation more than anything. So I think to be, you know, consistent with how we've dealt with the providers that have franchises now, I think it makes sense to allow that continue to happen. Now, does that mean that the company absolutely will? So I can tell you I've had conversations with operators that have broadband companies that have said they're not gonna pass it through. Their business model is, we want to be different than our competitors, meaning the cable industry, and we want to give one price, and that's what you pay. So if it's $75, it's $75. Okay, that's what they say. Now, will the 5% franchise fee not allow the broadband companies to build out quickly? And there's no real good independent studies that are out there on that. But I can tell you from experience with cable television, when cable television really started growing, which was starting in the early 1980s. In the early 1980s, I remember that all the cable television providers paid franchise fees, okay? Let's just say they had no subscribers in 1980. By 1990, they had 50 million subscribers nationwide. So did the franchise fee impact the build out of cable television systems? I think the answer to that is no. And I'm of the opinion personally, not being an economist or having done any big studies on this, but I think the answer is going to be the same with broadband.
And do you almost think maybe it did impact it, but in an increased it way, in the sense of with that franchising, now the utilities are going everywhere. Now it's available to more people. As a result of that, it actually did impact it, but not in a negative way.
Not in a negative way, positive way.
In a positive way.
Could have. I think also, you know, when you look at local cable franchising and Mary's commission, they required, in the late 1990s, they required cable system upgrades. And what happened as a result of those cable system upgrades? It allowed the provision of broadband. And that was a huge development because we went from, you know, no penetration for cable television to really massive penetration, right? Meaning residents served in just a short period of time. If you look at that same time for the phone industry, phone company went from 100% penetration. There was a time that at least some of us can remember that we all had phone service. We all had a phone on our wall, right? There's a reason why there's a phone jack on your wall if you have a house that was built, you know.
Nick, that's
Before
that thing that you
2000.
hold and you pick it up and there's a cord and then you can.
Not that young.
I've got another slide, just as an aside, I have another slide that when I do presentations, and it's a Harvest Gold kitchen with a phone, you know, phone on the wall with the cord and everything. Well, anyway, my point is, phone subscriptions went from 100% down to 25%, like that. And I really believe that in part that was due to the local requirements that these companies upgrade their systems. Phone companies, by the way, aren't subject to local jurisdiction. And I think that's, you know, at least arguably, that's why when you get DSL service in places, probably here, you see some with lightning fast service, depending on how close they are to the thing, right? And others that have terrible, you know, close to dial-up speeds.
So hypothetically, if we have our discussion and we let staff know, sure, let's move forward, what would be a reasonable time frame for next steps? What would be an unreasonable time frame? From how Sawashko did it, from what's reasonable from legal standpoint, from staffing standpoint, logistics? What does this look like?
Well, I'll tell you what it looked like exactly from the city of Woodbury. City of Woodbury made the decision. It was, when it was made, as soon as they made it, they referred the franchising to their franchising authority, which is the commission, same thing here. The commission immediately started, the connection with the providers. Once the providers said that they were willing to get the franchise, then we went through the time and expense of going through the franchising process, because there's a franchising process that's laid out in statute. From the time that we published notice, which is the first step of the process, we have to publish notice once a week for 2 successive weeks. From that time to the time that we negotiated and adopted the franchise, it was 59 days.
Thank you.
So we are prepared. I can tell you that we, as a commission, are prepared. We'll have a franchise application ready to go. We know the process. We know how to, do all that. So we're ready to go. And we have a good template from what we did in South Washington. So we're ready to go and ready to go quickly, as long as our dance partner is willing to go.
Additional questions for Mr. Bradley or Ms. Klein before we have a chat?
Yeah, I have one more question. So when it comes to the risks, you were saying that one of the risks could be that a company would look at the franchise fee and go, you know what, we're not gonna bring our service to that city, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, have there been any cities that have adopted that franchise and the companies have avoided that said city?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so a couple of follow-ups on that, and maybe some of this is more discussion, but I'm just trying to understand a little bit more as well. And so I think, and it's tough.
That's why you have me here.
And it's tough
Yeah.
because I know this is new, so there isn't a
Yeah.
lot of this information. Woodbury, for example, right? So Intrepid is coming in, they're the wholesaler, they're the one that is, they're putting in the infrastructure for other ISPs or information service providers to use. Is that correct?
One or more.
And one or more information service providers will use the infrastructure that Intrepid puts in.
Yeah.
So Intrepid is, they're the franchisee, correct?
They are.
And then they're gonna rent their infrastructure to these different information service providers.
Yeah. It's not a rent, but yeah, yes.
Or so
The-
what
You know,
would it be considered?
the best way that I can describe what Intrepid does, is they kind of white label their products, if you know what white labeling means.
Yeah.
Basically, they're providing the service, they're providing all of the services. But the company that they work through, which I don't think this is a secret, but it's T-Mobile. Then T-Mobile resells basically that service over the,
But Intrepid is the franchisee, there
They are.
isn't multiple franchisees. And I guess that was one of my questions, is there wouldn't be a situation where multiple companies would want to come in and put in infrastructure. Do you see that being a possibility? Two Intrepid-like companies wanting to come in and put in infrastructure. I don't see any reason for that, correct?
I can't explain all of the economics that are going on right now. We are seeing, companies like Intrepid. We still see Quantum Fiber, which is here.
Yep.
So that's 2 fiber to the home companies. Now, Quantum Fiber was just recently sold, as you probably know.
Yep.
And the deal closed in February. So Quantum Fiber is now, it used to be run by Lumen, and now it's being run by AT&T.
Okay, perfect.
So you're gonna have,
Yep.
I mean, you probably are gonna have multiples.
Okay.
Now, the economics breaks down at some point for these providers, right?
Correct. And so, all right, again, so Woodbury as the example, right? Intrepid is the wholesaler, or the They're the one that's gonna white label it, they're the one, the franchisee.
Yeah.
How many, have they had information service providers already approach them and say, yes, we wanna white label, we wanna use this infrastructure? Have they already had those companies approach them and ask about that? Or is it too early in
Well,
the
you know,
process?
I don't know all the ins and outs of Intrepid's dealings and who's contacted them. I know they have one.
Okay. And where I'm going with this is I'm trying to figure out if, I think it can be a really positive for the end users if there's more competition, right? And so in general, with the free market, government should stay out of it for the most part, right? It's gonna make it worse. Now, in a situation where I think sometimes this industry, it can be a little bit more monopolistic, where if there's only one provider, we do run into issues, right? And so that is where having a little bit more government regulation is super important. And I think it actually happened as a result of having a franchisee who does put in this infrastructure, is I actually think it's gonna create an opportunity for more of these information service providers to wanna come and compete. And again, that's why I'm just asking if maybe you've seen that. I'm speculating that that could be a result of this, and I think that would be a positive. You know, from the cost perspective, I was asking about that last time. You know, if it was just one person franchising it, I would be very concerned that cost gets passed through, right? Because now they're in control. But if the wholesaler has 3, 4 ISPs that are using that infrastructure, now they have to compete. And so that is gonna be a differentiator. So I guess that's something, I think this could be a really good opportunity to get all these benefits that they're talking about. I'm a little concerned about that happening if it is just one company. But through this infrastructure, I do think it's gonna bring in more competition, actually. And I kind of moving into discussion there, sorry.
But your point's well taken. I mean, the Intrepid system is built for that,
Yeah.
for multiple providers
Yep.
using the system.
And-
It's an open access system, so
Okay.
it can have multiple providers.
Okay. I know I sent you some of these questions here, so
Is
kind
there
of
a
going out of
cap
order.
to the multiple providers? Or is it just
It's
as
just
many
whatever
providers?
their system can handle.
Okay.
The question, again, probably hard to answer, because, you know, it's in the process, but you mentioned, all right, obviously, you said, hey, there's gonna be better build-out standards, better system performance standards. Again, you know, my comment that I said was, okay, hey, you know, I'm a little concerned about that. Typically, the free market handles that better than government can handle it. But again, if this is a situation where, as a result of that infrastructure coming in, instead of having just Comcast being the provider for an area, right? You know, so like with my business, that was my option. You know, I had one option, and so that's what I have to go with. So with this, I don't think the franchisee necessarily is gonna be the one that necessarily leads to the better customer service, the better, hopefully the better infrastructure. But I think it's gonna be the information service providers that are utilizing that system that are gonna be forced to provide better services.
Is there a contract with Intrepid or whomever will require it?
Correct.
Yeah, and then that is happening as a direct result of this,
Yeah.
is the contracts between the infrastructure provider and the user of it, the company using it.
Yes.
In their contracts, they're required to
Uphold
comply
the
with those
standards.
terms.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
So does this apply to broadband that is already in the city? Or only to future installation of broadband?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Actually, it's the first one on this bullet point that we're looking at here. It applies to everybody, all broadband-only providers.
So so Comcast, who has lines here, will have to come to terms with the franchise?
Comcast is different.
Oh,
Comcast is.
splendid.
Comcast is in this Title VI box, okay? Title VI has restrictions on cities that Title I does not have. And right now, the way the FCC has interpreted Title VI, we cannot regulate, we as cities cannot regulate the non-cable services.
Even though
Comcast.
the infrastructure itself is broadband.
Correct. And I'm not saying it makes sense. I mean,
No,
don't-
it
yeah,
makes zero
doesn't- it
sense
ma-
whatsoever, but
Can I follow up on that too? And so,
no. Yes.
thank you. Because Comcast is in Woodbury, correct?
Correct.
So now there's two, again, more competition, right? Because Comcast is going to continue to deliver their services. Intrepid is coming in with their infrastructure. They're going to be able to directly compete with Comcast now, and that's going to hold Comcast to a higher standard.
Which I think every resident would love to see that.
Like, as Intrepid looks to build out with fiber, has Comcast made a statement about converting their system to fiber?
That's a great question. I don't have any evidence one way or the other yet.
I don't know if they've made some, some statement with the competition.
Yeah. My guess is they will
Yeah, we can-
try to lock in customers in that area for longer periods of time with really good deals.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry.
Yes,
Last
and then
one, I
let's have a
promise.
chat.
As far as for future development, how is that handled with the franchisee? Is it
Included.
for
Yeah.
perpetuity, if we, 30 years from now, have future development, they're on the hook for bringing that infrastructure?
Yeah, we address annexed areas, for example, but otherwise, the franchise is for the entire corporate boundaries of the city, typically.
Thank you, Mr. Werner and Ms. Klein. Let's have a chat. So thoughts?
Kind of gave mine already on it.
Yes, you did.
No, I think it's a good opportunity. Was there anything in there about how long it would take for that infrastructure to build out here?
As I recall,
years.
yeah, as I recall from our discussion last time, it's a multi-year process.
And they
Got it.
set the terms for 5 years for it to be built out.
Okay, and is that for the entirety of the city? Okay, got it. I mean, I think it's a great opportunity for us, so I would be totally for this. I don't really have anything else to add, but I'd be for adding this franchise to the city.
The thing that gets me is not just the customer service, because customer service matters. We all have stories about certain providers, I'm not gonna say any names, where that could be improved. But this is one of the rare instances where government has the opportunity to help force customer services to be improved. And I think that is a value gained. To me, the big thing is helping to ensure that there are areas of our community that have broadband. And I find it absolutely abhorrent in the year 2026 that we have areas that don't have it, when we're a second-ring suburb. Like, that's just inexcusable. So I think this is a very good vehicle for it. I think the interesting conversation, because that 43% drop in revenue for a quality partner of ours, the SCC, is problematic. Fully agreed. This revenue stream has to be modernized. I hope, say hypothetically, we move forward. I don't want to see a situation where in the SCC, well, Lake Elmo is helping to improve the revenue stream, but no one else is. So I hope, and you mentioned other cities are going that route, I don't want to be the only ones helping that process, but I'm optimistic there'll be many entities helping that, because that revenue is necessary for a good provider that has been our partner for many years.
I think it's a good opportunity for us for two reasons. First, Matt, you said, just like when we moved to Lake Elmo, you had one provider.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it.
Yep.
And that's what it was, right? And it's copper. And the other thing is, if you go out in the rural parts of the state of Minnesota's been paying for fiber to the premises. I mean, I have friends who live in the middle of nowhere on the Iron Range, and got fiber to their house, and I'm sitting with copper at mine. And so, I think that by going to broadband and providing competition, well, two things. First, it'll expedite the opportunity for fiber. Number two, it'll provide competition, which will keep prices more competitive. And, it will also, like I said, improve customer service, because now you have the ability to change. I mean, you can go to satellite now. I see, as on TV, but I don't know how good that is or bad, I'm not sure. But I mean, it's still not the same as having the fiber. And so I don't think where we have anything to lose in this deal, personally, unless I'm missing something. I mean, yeah, we're gonna put fiber in our right of way, and anytime you add more to your right of way, that creates, additional challenges for the city. But our choice is to be, have one provider, which is never healthy.
What piece of information would staff like to know from this discussion? Because what I'm hearing is, yep, there are some risks that we want to work through, but general consensus is let's move the ball. What are things that would help you for the next time?
I don't think we need anything else. I would work with Mike Bradley and Mary to figure out the next steps and when we would come back to council.
I would just add, so one concern, council
no
last
concerns.
time, when we had this discussion, she did raise some concerns. I think it would
Yep.
be important to have Sarah there as well for those conversations, so she can bring that perspective of the risks.
Yep.
Because she obviously raised some of those concerns. But again, I mean, it sounds like it's a risk-reward situation
Yep.
here, so we gotta figure that out.
And we would be covered by the League of Minnesota Cities regardless. So I think a very good conversation down the road is then that the piece for the senior and disabled discount. I'd be very looking forward to how that plays out, what discussion we can have. Because we do have a large population of seniors. I have no idea what our population is of disabled people. But we do often hear from our seniors about cost of living. So I think that is a very advantageous item that can come out of this. Above and beyond that, good chat. Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Thank you, Ms. Klein. Enjoy your evening. Next up, community forecast and the 2050 comp plan. Mr. Stopa. Please explain the broadband incorporating into the 2050 comp plan.
Okay, good evening. We're here tonight to talk about the community forecast for the 2050 comprehensive plan. As you may know, the system statement starts the process for the comprehensive plan, and there's a limited time to appeal the system statement. Majority of communities do not appeal the system statement, and one thing that we found out recently is that our population numbers, that we knew seemed low, but that they were low because of the White Bear Lake case, that the Met Council took that into consideration and lowered numbers for a few cities around the area. So that was something we learned later on. And so the issue before the council tonight is we have a couple ways to work through this is, should the city amend its 2040 plan to adopt new projections? So we have a current plan. I've been talking to the Met Council. This could be a way to make our population numbers more accurate to what they actually are. And then also the strategies, because this would not address the 2050 number. So how to work through the comp plan and that 2050 number and the planning efforts that go along with that through this whole process with the 2050 comp plan. So the system statements are released and they address transportation, land use, water resources, parks, trails, and there's others. And then once it's released, communities have 3 years to amend and update their comprehensive plans to comply with these regional systems. Here is the 2050 system statement we want to focus on population and households. So the 2030 number that they have for us is 15,200. And then the 2040, 16,900 and 18,900. So this is concerning when we get this because it appears that our 2025 number is going to be really close to that 15,000 number. So the implications of forecasts, this guides our comprehensive plan understanding our need to accommodate the regional growth, households and population, employment. It also assists with our sewer planning and all, wastewater planning, And then there's concerns that if these numbers get locked in at a lower number, that other agencies may use it to keep us from growing, or, you know, that it may prevent us in some ways when they're doing review memos. So just to give you a timeline of events, September 22nd is when they officially release the system statement. That's kind of the time where they release it, and then you can start the process with the comprehensive plan. So we met and discussed it internally, and we wanted to know what their data sources were and the trends, what informed their population, household estimates. And then what happens if development exceeds the forecasted growth, because we believe that would occur. So a couple days later, we met with the council sector rep. And what we learned is that the primary changes to forecast were due to regional trends, that they just believe that the trend regionally is gonna decrease in terms of population, you have people moving out. And the White Bear Lake issue was not talked about at that meeting. There was openness from the Met Council on adjusting forecasts as we go along. So the conversation was, you know, it's not very difficult to amend your population when you need to, and there's processes that we go through to do that. So you wouldn't be penalized or punished for growing. So we followed up, asked questions, just to kind of understand their methodology, nothing about White Bear Lake. And then the clarification, like, could we adjust the forecast? And really, the only issue was, as long as there was sewer capacity, we could, you know, increase population. And the interceptors are in different areas with different, you know.
Director Stopa,
Yes.
do you have a hypothesis why at two different instances, when discussing the change in the trend, the White Bear Lake issue was not cited by them as changing their trend? Like on the 28th and the 29th, at both instances, the methodologies for regional forecast, the White Bear Lake issue was not cited.
It's difficult to say, because talking to, I believe the board member, she wasn't aware until much later, and it's possible that the sector rep wasn't made aware of the memo too. So it's unclear, and if, I'm assuming that the person that did the projections was made aware of it, because how could they do it without knowing that? And I believe that memo did come out
Yeah.
later. It just wasn't shared with us, even when we asked questions related to it. Because we did ask questions like, is the issue with the White Bear Lake lawsuit a reason why these numbers seem low? They don't seem to be correct.
Back up one slide at the bottom, you talk about the clarification of forecast could be adjusted unless regional systems could not support growth. So if we're actually growing faster than what their projections are showing, they may not be building enough sewer capacity for that growth, and we could have our growth restricted by sewer capacity.
That's correct. And then the question is, there's different interceptors in different areas. So if you look at the southwest corner, if you remember, High Point Crossing wanted to come in with this sewered open space. Well, at that time, there wasn't the capacity. They had some construction projects that they needed to complete for that to move forward. So that area in the southwest is almost built out and is almost at sewer capacity. It's a little bit different for the 180 acres, and then obviously there's a lot of unbuilt Musa area to the southeast. So that was concerning, because that was a caveat of, well, you know, this is one of the things that could prevent you, but it's hard to know what the capacity looks like when you have different areas and interceptors. So the period of appeals for the system statement closed. We did not recommend an appeal. The ability to, because we were under the impression that we could adjust our forecast as needed through the process. And also, this whole time we were talking about leading up to the comp plan, we really needed a better understanding of our land uses and what those population numbers would be going forward. Because when we talk about the numbers, we believe they are too low, but it's not like a big adjustment. We could decide to re-guide areas which would reduce our household population, and that is independent of like trying to get our numbers lower. We just might think, okay, well, this area is better if it's commercial, right? So obviously you still need sewer there, but the household population would be a little bit different. So we wanted to go through that process to understand where we were. So then on January 15th, we received the White Bear Lake methodology memo from the city of Hugo. So they were very concerned, and they essentially stated that we should be concerned and that they could possibly prevent growth. So we compiled permitting data, and then the development pipeline were sent to the Met Council, countering the low forecast. And then after we met with them, the council forecaster sector rep acknowledged that the permitting, they looked through the data, we have pretty good data with the permitting data in the forecast, specifically the forecasts are very detailed. And they agreed that a solution is needed for a more reasonable forecast. So one of the things that we provided were just the permitting data for essentially the last 10 years. It's single-family detached and attached. And what you're missing here is apartment buildings, because we didn't have very many of them. But we are gonna see a trend towards apartments and single-family attached. But we're still over, I think the projection, if we end up at 18,900, was like under 100 units a year going forward. So we'll probably see more than that. We project to see more than that. So this is the next slide that is really interesting. I think it made it clear to them just how low the numbers are. So one of the things that we do on our financial side is we have development projections to track sewer availability charge, water availability charge, and then permitting fees that we think we're gonna receive in the next 20 years. We have every parcel that's in the MUSA with their acreage and their density ranges kind of worked in to estimate what we would get on those properties. We don't look at areas outside of the MUSA until they're in the pipeline. So if we know an OPPD is coming in, we'll add that to the chart, and then we can plan for it. So we put this together, units per year. You can see at the top column, we're over, 200, I'm sorry, for 2026, 278, 491, 316, 413. Some of this, a lot of the numbers increase has to do with Limerick and that going through the process. You can see unit totals, and then we're basing off a 2.5 or 2.7. Really, the 2.5 is the better one for us to use because our average household size is decreasing as we add apartments and townhouses. So if you look at that, if you look at 2030, the population that we have is 18,952. So that is going to exceed the 2050 number that they provided. And their number is 15,200. And you can see our very conservative estimate in 2026 will have 15,127. We won't get the true number for 2025 from the Met Council until about July of 26. It's always a year behind. So as you can see in the 2040 number, we're estimating about 22,000, and it's 16,900.
Can you just speak to, so the projections kind of beyond a couple of years here, is that just based off of current zoning? Is that based off of permits already applied for? I guess, does the speculation become pretty does it become pretty speculative beyond a few years here of what that growth is going to be?
It is interesting. So everything that we have post 2030, it's very speculative, right?
Okay.
And then everything is pretty good between 2030. It's pretty accurate, maybe off a year. Obviously, Limerick is such a big project for our population because our population isn't that great. Like it's 15,000, a little bit over. That could have like a 5% change, right, in total population. It's one project. What we did here was we basically took the unit count and then moved it out to 2 years. Met Council, when they do theirs, is they use a 1-year delay on single family and a 2-year delay on apartments, because the start of construction, it usually takes 2 years to complete and fill the apartments. So you can see here, this is the projection that we have. Obviously, the permit numbers decrease as you go along, but there's also large areas that aren't scheduled to be built out till later. So you see like 1 year is 364. I mean, that's because we just took that one project and dropped it instead of trying to like split it over years.
Based upon the phasing that's in the comp plan?
Yeah.
Is that the intersection of Lake Elmo Ave and Hudson, that area?
I believe Lake Elmo Ave and Hudson, that area is mixed-use commercial, mixed-use business parks. So
Yeah.
those are high densities, pretty large areas. So that would be something that's not in the current phasing. And I'm not sure, but there's areas in the village that are a little bit higher. But that area you're referring to is the one that is phased out.
Could you just restate again, what of these numbers from 2026, 2027, 2028, do we know for sure are already, we've approved, we know is going forward? Are any of those numbers not even speculative?
They're pretty accurate. I
Those,
mean,
yeah,
the
like-
one project that's included that should go forward, because they're moving through the process,
Yep.
is Limerick, which is
Limerick.
over 600 units. It's just a matter of when that hits, but we also have taken their units, and we know it's not gonna be
Spread
built,
out.
we spread them out.
But
right?
that's what we're seeing there with the 491 in 2027, heavily
Right.
coming from Limerick.
Right.
When Hugo provided their concern, because they're in a similar boat, not totally the same ocean, but a similar boat. Did they mention concerns at all about the concept of potentially what happens if a government changes the zoning to a lower density and how that might affect the property owner who is an investor or a farmer who, that's a taking?
I want to speak. on
They
that.
haven't mentioned that, but typically you can do that, especially if it's phased out, if you need to adjust it. I mean, that is the challenge with this, is that we're required to meet a 3.5 units per acre through their plan, and we have a certain amount of acreage in the MUSA, right? So that's definitely a challenge, and it's hard to say, but one of the things that we're able to do through this is have a pretty good understanding of the MUSA, and we've talked about it. Even if we kind of upzoned everything and everyone wanted to go in that direction, Met Council, you pretty much cap out at around 25,000 in the current MUSA.
So I was just gonna say, because I was thinking a lot about that as well, and even from like the, legally, is there a challenge? But there is, again, my thought is no, there wouldn't be. When people choose to sell their land or not choose to sell their land, or a developer chooses to purchase land or chooses not to purchase land, it's total speculation, right? And so, because that was going through my mind, is like, does that cause concerns from land that's been purchased by developers? And my thought would be no, right? If the comp plan does have to change as a result of these new projections, well, it changed the other way previously, now it's going back, right? And people who sold their land 2 years before it went up wish they would have waited, and so I think it's just speculation, so I don't think, and I guess, Sarah might be able to speak on that better, but
But
I don't think there would be.
typically, downzoning is not considered a taking, though, because you are giving them rights to
Yeah.
develop their land.
Yeah. Okay.
So after this, they reviewed it, the demographer reviewed it at the Met Council. We received an update from Angela Torres, who is their senior manager of planning at the Met Council. And what they advised was for us to amend our 2040 plan so that we could use our updated numbers that we feel are very accurate, and to adjust that, which would essentially increase the number for 2030 and 2040 when you compare it to the 2050 plans. So it would raise the forecast in 2030 from, and this is for the 2040 plan, from 6,500 households to 7,200 households. And our average household size would be 2.66 for a population of 19,200 for 2030. And then for 2040, it would go from 6,500 to 8,250 with 2.59 household size, and it would be 21,400. So that is, what we've been told is if we go forward with a comp plan amendment to our current comp plan, they would carry those numbers forward into our 2050 plan for 2030 and 2040. What they stated is that they don't feel comfortable changing the policy position beyond 2040 due to the White Bear Lake memo. And we can talk about that a little bit.
So you're just saying they wouldn't want to go above 21,400?
21,400, so essentially, if
That's
there
where we have
isn't
the
a.
cap.
Yeah, if White Bear Lake isn't resolved, they don't want to change the 2050 number. So the 2024 number defaults to the 2050 number.
Okay.
But as you know, we'll be back here 10 years later, working on a new plan.
Yeah.
So overall summary for the White Bear Lake memo, is that the Met Council determined it's prudent to withhold its consent of additional growth in local jurisdictions affected by the White Bear Lake area court decision until the council is assured additional growth does not conflict with court orders that cities must abide. And then if a request is made, it must only be considered after modification of the court order, a change in local conditions, or a solution to water supply constraints are determined and implemented. So that's the concern that we have, is that they're really the deadline for this. Clark's here. Clark has a lot of information on this, but June 30th, 2027. So what they're asking us to do is, you could go forward with a comp plan amendment to increase your 2030, 2040 number, and then possibly after the 2027 date, amend the 2050 comp plan number prior to finalizing the 2050 comp plan. So this is the bottom line is, refuse to allow a higher population projection than the 2040 plan. They agree that the September 25 forecasts are low and that the city has the option to amend Thrive 2040. So you can see the numbers, we just went through them, but essentially the 2050 number would stay at 21,400. And then they are willing to discuss an expanded 2050 forecast in mid-2027 after the White Bear Lake Area Comprehensive Plan Work Group concludes. So if you're looking at amending the plan, that's a question before the council at the workshop. You would see that our household would, they would increase, but some of the numbers, like for example, the number increases, this is just for the 2040 plan. The population, households would actually increase, the population would increase in the 2040 plan. The households in 2040 would go up slightly from 8,200 to 8,250, but our population would decrease slightly because we know that our average household size is decreasing since the last time the plan was done.
All right, so that's a key takeaway. Ignoring the Imagine 2050, this would actually have a reduction by 900 people for the 2040. Because right now, our 2040 says 22,304.
That's correct, and that's based on the decrease of the average household.
Our current comp plan for 2040 has the 22,000.
Yep.
So it was surprising to us too, because the numbers were much higher and then
Yeah.
they came in lower.
Which essentially is the same as what Stillwater has for 2040.
Wait, so this isn't, that's not the number when we did the 2040 comp plan. That's not the number that we were at, correct? The 22,000?
No,
'Cause
so
was-
the
it was
total number of
significant.
population, I think it was 11,000.
Or,
And then they
sorry,
projected that we go all the way by 2040 to 22,304.
so I thought that projection was higher when they originally gave us the numbers that we were aiming for 2030, 2040, 2050. That was the number.
You don't have anything?
Yeah, so if
Neil?
I can jump in, so the numbers that are not in parentheses, these are in your current adopted comprehensive plan. So that would have been the forecast that the city adopted in 2018-19 when the 2040 plan was adopted.
Okay.
So essentially, the discussion here tonight is to completely ignore the Imagine 2050, just anything they sent us, and would we be interested in essentially codifying what we see is happening as a faster increase, but then we would have an understanding that the 2040 and the 2050 are flatlined until the issue that needs to be resolved doesn't get resolved.
That's correct. That's correct. And then that amendment is typical to an amendment to the Met Council. We
Hey,
would-
Jason, sorry, quick question, because can you go back to slide 5? Because I have a question about.
5?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the population projection is 16,900 here. Am I confused on that?
So that 16,900 is in our 2050 plan that we haven't started yet. They are
Okay.
projecting that in 2040, we will have 16,900.
So that's the new numbers that they gave out to us that aren't official yet, that we,
And that's the 21,000 number that we're talking about?
So the amendment that they're suggesting from their original system statement is to go up to 21,400.
Okay. And then what was the reduction then? Because wasn't there a reduction from 22,000?
So then the 2050 or 2040, I was gonna be 22,000 was what we had in our comp plan originally,
Yep, so.
Right now, as of today.
as of today.
Yep, so council, yeah, you're understanding that correctly. The images on the screen here, these are from the system statement that was released in September of last year.
Yeah.
These are the problematic projections because they're too low. The table contains the 2040 comprehensive plan forecasts that we're basically hoping to go back to because they were at higher at the time. So instead of having this new lower projection, it's basically going back to what we had basically already had an agreement upon with the Met Council back when they approved that plan.
Got it.
Do we know, did the staffer who did this at the Met Council or their supervisor have any discussions with the court? Because that seems like a pretty big information gap.
So we've been talking to Gail Cedarberg, who is our representative on the Met Council itself. She was not aware of this White Bear Lake memo. They say they posted it. Their notice was just put it on the website without telling anybody about it. So she basically, it's basically a staff level decision. So basically, the head of the Community Development Department was the one, for whatever reason, came up with this idea. And we don't have any idea if they've coordinated with the courts. The feeling is they haven't coordinated with the DNR, that's my impression. But, yeah, we don't have any idea really.
Thank you.
Acting Mayor and Council, I would like to add, a meeting that was missing from the timeline is our Washington County partners did put together a meeting with county commissioners and then 2 Met Council members, as well as myself representing Lake Elmo, and then Hugo in Oakdale to talk about this White Bear Lake methodology memo. And so our big ask was for them to go back and have the staff policy that was put in place reversed. And so we are still awaiting a response from that meeting, but that did happen mid-March.
Thank you. I assume there's also our modeling for our utilities and for our building inspectors for the permits is also based upon the same methodology. Obviously, 5 years is one thing, 15 years is another. And am I correct to presume the Imagine 2050 numbers have an impact on our modeling that we have for our utility and our revenue streams?
They would, so.
A bad impact.
It would. We have modeling that isn't based on 2050, on the 2050 plan. It's based on the MUSA and the densities that we've adopted. So we're projecting that out with concerns about permit revenues and everything else that we, our revenues. We just want to know kind of like how that looks like in the next 10 to 15 years. But if they said you only have this many households, then we would really need to do a deep dive on the land use and figure out how we would restrict that number and reduce it, possibly having more areas for commercial or whatever that looks like, lower densities, if that was the case. But I will say that if we move forward with this amendment and bring the number up to 21.9, it's in line with our projections, so we should be good for the next 10 years.
Hypothetically, if we all say the heck with this, no, what would it look like with the Imagine 2050? I mean, the 15.2, 16.9, 18.9, when our 2040 is zoned for 22,000, has the city staff thought of hypothetical ways as to how we would downzone that, certain areas where it might be more appropriate, or is that just so far down the road for steps that's?
Yeah, so I looked at that. Essentially, we try to keep certain densities high enough to meet the affordable housing standards that we have to meet. It's about closing kind of the density ranges, because if you provide someone with a range, they typically build to a higher range. So just kind of working those numbers down. And then you would obviously have to look at land use and then determine where you could reduce households in certain areas. I
Thank
think,
you.
I would say like the 18.9, you possibly could, if you did everything that I'm talking about, you could possibly guide it down to around I think I had 19,200, but so I think they did that. in terms of understanding, like, what's the kind of minimum that you can have?
There'd be a quantum change fiscally for the city to basically stop the machine that we put in place, as far as development goes. There would be a very big fiscal challenge.
Well, there's gonna be a fiscal challenge if we keep growing as well, though.
Well, it's one or the other.
Kick the can down the road. I mean, we'd be in the same situation if
Yeah.
we keep developing. I mean, development does not lower costs. Taxes go up with development, so
At some point, the music stops on the dance.
what if we stop the music now versus stop the music 10 years from now? We're gonna have to have the music stop 10 years from now as well, right? So I wanna be real clear about that regardless, yes, there is gonna be likely a tax impact if growth stops. There's gonna be a tax impact if growth continues and when that growth stops. So we're not gonna get out of that either way.
Yeah, and staff have not analyzed that as part of this discussion. We've not looked at the fiscal impacts today or tomorrow on that.
Maybe just to stay on, because I was thinking the same thing with, if that was the course we went is, okay, well, we want to aim for those numbers. What does that look like for the next year or two before we have imagine 2050, we have a 2040 comp plan? We would have to be looking at making amendments to our 2040 comp plan over the next couple of years and over the next year pretty significantly. Is there issues with Met Council would probably have to be understanding of us making amendments to our comp plan if we're trying to meet these new numbers that they originally provided us with.
So I'm just trying to, so if you're saying when the 2050 plan is adopted at a low number, how would we go about that? Because right now,
So
our
before-
population,
Before we complete the 2050 plan, right? We're going off of the 24 comp plan right now that was approved by Met Council. If we said, yes, Met Council, the system statement numbers that you gave us of 15,200, 16,900, we want to go with those numbers. We're going to have to take steps immediately to start rezoning and amending our 2040 land usage that we put in the 2040 comp plan to try to stay on track with those numbers if we actually want to try to not go above.
if the game was like, we need to make these numbers match, we probably can't even do that at this point. There's probably enough projects that have been entitled that would be a big, gray area. I don't know how that would work with them, but.
Can you go back to the slide that has all the way out to the year by year? So likely we already have ones that are titled a population of our 18.9.
I think our population in 2025 will be 15,127. This was very conservative, right? We don't have the 2025 number. We do have the 24 number. So.
I mean,
By
I'm
the
looking
end
at the units because, as you said, like Limerick is a big one as well. And have they already put in for preliminary plat?
They've submitted.
Yes, we're reviewing for completeness, we'll say right now, so.
So hypothetically, and I'm not going to say it. Okay, so, you've laid out potentially 445. Oh, wait, we're in 2026, geez. 278, 491, 316, 413. Your statement is that those are things that are likely already entitled.
Yes, I mean.
Which, and if I go downward, that puts us at a population of in the 18s with things that are already titled.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at 2026, that is the building construction start year. So from 2024, counting, from 2023, so everything that occurred in 2024, 25, and what we are planning for 2026, it grows to a total of almost 1,000 units in those 3 years, which is, roughly 2,500 people. So.
Because it's also is it Roars?
Roars is counted in this, but they're about 200 units.
So,
We also have Inwood, townhomes, Inwood apartments.
so when you look at it, we're talking about 900 people over the next 14 years. I don't know why we're having such stress over that.
Well, I think part of it is people fought pretty darn hard to keep these numbers as low as possible. I mean, went to Supreme Court in an effort to keep these numbers as low as possible. I almost would have to imagine Met Council was probably had their head snap when we started saying, hey, we want these numbers to go up, given the kind of the fight that we've given them. You know, now I get it from, like, obviously from the staff perspective, like, what are you supposed to do? These are the predictions or projections that we've given, you know, you're going off of that and you want to make sure that there's enough infrastructure. So I completely get the ask for that amendment, right, based off of what we've made decisions on. I think those decisions were forced in the sense because Met Council said you have to do this despite Lake Elmo not wanting to do those things, right? And so it is challenging because I look at this, I'm like, man, we have an opportunity to get kind of what we were originally looking for when we had this debate with Met Council years ago. We're unfortunately so far along with development that it is kind of, it's a hard train to stop. And so I guess that's where I'm just trying to figure out, well, how do we, I think the residents would be pissed off if we don't try to minimize it as much as possible, just given the history of how hard we've worked to make sure that number doesn't go up.
I'm just saying, for 900 people, the sensitivity of our estimates, you know, is much worse than the 900 people. I mean, if we actually hit 21,400, it probably would be a miracle. I mean, you're going on 14 years and predicting this development. Our chance of actually hitting it, you know, who knows? I mean, what do you say our sensitivity is, 25% on these numbers?
Say that again?
Our sensitivity on these projections.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're pretty solid, but there's, like, you know, the density ranges could throw, we're estimating at some point, like the range, so it's difficult. It's also, the timing is challenging too.
We're estimating how many houses we're gonna build, you know, 10 years from now. You can't tell me how we're gonna build five years from now. We just don't know that number.
And that's, we were in a different kind of boat than other people too, because we are talking about possibly 900 or 1,000 additional people at the end, at 2050. Like at the end, if, it could be very minimal if you don't expand the MUSA. So that's another conversation that we're not having tonight, but like, your numbers would expand if the MUSA expanded, but no one, including the Met Council, is asking for that right now.
I guess I would be very curious to know the financial impact, one way or the other, in terms of, because we do have the modeling, it impacts our budget and our utilities. Because there's several different possible outcomes here. I would be very curious, the presumptions we use right now for our modeling are based upon the current 2040 plan. What would that look like with the imagined 2050, the original? And what would it look like with the hybrid that Met Council has recommended and that we're discussing here? So there's really three different paths there. I would be curious to know how that affects our utility fund, how that affects the revenue stream that we presume to be occurring based upon permitting fees. Obviously, that this is one component, and I don't disagree with you, Councilmember Hearn. There are many residents who would jump for joy at the thought that we could put a cap on. And the other reality is we have a population around 18 to 19 that's already titled.
The other question that we have for you tonight that we haven't really talked about is, there is the amendment to the 2040 plan to kind of write the number and get it back to where it is. There's the other question of, is the 21.4 for 2040 okay to move forward in 2050? Or should we proactively work with the Met Council and essentially have an alternative growth scenario when we go forward, starting very soon, the comprehensive plan? So if
We say an alternative, like an alternative where a situation where our White Bear Lake issue is resolved and it's no longer hovering over us alternative?
Right, so the timing isn't great, so the idea is we could wait for the White Bear Lake issue to be resolved. That would be ideal, but we can't really wait. We have to have this completed, and we're running up against other timelines.
Our comp plans are due December of '28. The report to the legislators from the White Bear Lake Group is due, obviously, as you well know, June of '27. We'll be coming back to you. We're going to get our final studies done by July of this year, And we're gonna spend maybe 4 or 5 months as a group trying to come up with a consensus of what we feel is the most bang for the buck for stabilizing the lake. We'll be coming back to you here in the fall and January to see if, get buy-in from 14 different cities for the preferred solution. Once we get that through, hopefully all 14 cities will approve this. It won't hit the legislators till the 2028 session, if it's gonna be funded by the state. So the funding is one of the big components. We don't know where or how it's going to be funded. There's a lot of contention, to say the least, to have individual cities pay for this recreational improvement. In my assumption here is, you really can't wait for this White Bear Lake issue to be solved to address your 2050 comp plan at all. Because it's just not gonna happen in a timely fashion. So,
So the option with the alternative would be to set a number. We would work with the Met Council. It would be an estimate. We think it's anywhere, total build out in the MUSA currently with the land use is 22.5 to about 25,000. So trying to get a better idea when we move forward with land uses to provide that number to them. And should we move forward with that number? The alternative to not doing that would be if you agree to amend the 2040 plan, we would have a 21.4 for 40, and then we would just plan for that for 2050.
Would we have to amend the 2040 as well to, if we wanted to go to their system statement numbers, we'd have to amend our comp plan as well then? To go to the
No, no.
15,200?
If you're trying to reduce it, we wouldn't have to do anything. We would just move forward with the process, adopt
And
the
then
2050 plan.
it
We'd
would
probably
go as
be
part of that.
above the population.
Okay,
By how much, I don't know.
Okay.
But it puts us in a spot where it's unsure how we'd move forward with the entitled properties and the sewer capacity and doing the sewer study that's gonna go along.
can I make a little discussion point on that?
Absolutely.
So, and I think you mentioned it, Councilman Dragisich, about like, or I can't remember who said it, but the development's gonna happen when the development wants to happen. And okay, we're ahead of our determined schedule as of right now, and that's probably because Lake Elmo was such a hot market for developing, and so much occurred early on, right? And then it was gonna slow down as a result of that. So I think we've seen a large amount of that development happen. I think if we set these new numbers that they allowed us to have of the 16,900, 18,900, yes, we may be above that in 2040, but I think we can make adjustments to our 2050 plan to put us closer to that 18,900. I would rather us have to go back to that council and ask for an increase because we can't ask for a decrease.
I mean, when they issued the Imagine 2050, they weren't aware that we already have a population based upon what's been entitled that is well over 16.9. They're not aware of that. So they threw out that 16.9 number. They have no idea that we already have, with what's been approved, a population past that.
Correct, yep.
That's the,
Yep.
I wish they had, well, again, they're not gonna ask, how many cities are there in the 7 county? I mean, there's 200 cities. They're not gonna be checking in on everything. So I'll give them some deference there. I take great issue with how this even came to be on their end, but
It looks to me like with the 413 homes in 2029, we'll be at 18,162. Our population, those are already committed.
Let me go to the slide so I can see it.
Is
Are
that,
you
like, I
looking
wanna
at this
confirm
slide?
that is committed.
The first is the building construction start year.
Sorry, say that again?
I don't know the question, but you were referring to this chart. The building construction start year is the top portion.
Yep.
So that's 2024, that is units that were started in 24.
Yep.
That is accurate. 25 is accurate. 26 is an estimate that's fairly accurate. And 27 is where the Limerick development starts to push those numbers up.
Okay.
But if you take the way the chart is set up, and this is before we knew the Met Council's population methodology, because we were working on this very quickly, you would take that 24 number, which is a population of 598, and then just apply it to the 2024 population, and it skips a year, and it shows that the population, like, after the construction, after everything's done, we expect in 2 years, those units to be occupied. That's the methodology of that, like, from the construction start year, there's 2 years to fully occupy those units.
So in 2027, showing 491 units built, the population, as a result, that will be 18,162, 2 years later.
Yep, that's correct.
So we're already pretty much 18,160 is pretty much guaranteed, based on current development plans.
That is true. I mean, just to throw this out here, because I know we're not talking about projects that are not entitled, but we have other projects, people come all the time, they know what the land use is, they're looking to develop land between Lake Elmo and Keats, and trying to figure out plans for that. So I see if it goes forward, we have a 10-year window where we're gonna have a lot of developers looking to develop. We talk to developers all the time in different parcels, so.
So if we adopt the 21,400, that's not a lot more growth beyond what we kind of have committed to already.
Yeah.
And we'd have to slow things down quite a bit.
I mean, the way
Correct,
I'm
yeah.
seeing this is because the Met Council now is aware, at least some staffers are, of the issue, the 2060 and the 2070 plan, hopefully it means we're not then projecting a 25,000 and 30,000 and 35,000 population. Because technically, absent of that, there's no reason that is not a part of the city projections down the road based upon what's available along 36 and build-outs in all the other additional areas. That is absolutely possible. You obviously can't subdivide 2.5 acre lots, but the 10 acre, the 20 acre, the 40 acre lots, the city potentially could be 35 to 40,000 when it's all built out. And as I recall, Mr. Schroeder, that's what some of the numbers are that have been given to the White Bear Lake subgroup in the hypotheticals of what's the the highest case population numbers.
Yeah, so for the 14 cities, we're using the term called ultimate development. So basically where there is no more land to put one more house on. And in conjunction with the staff here, we kind of took a, wild guess at 20, I think it was like 25,000 or something like that. We thought when every single piece of land was developed, we thought we'd have around 25 to 26, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Based on current zoning.
I can add something too also with we're not projecting farmland either, or rural areas.
The rural open space PUD.
Right, it's when they actually go through the process, do we add them to this chart? So like, there's areas of unsewered that could increase the population.
So maybe this is an opportunity in that if we say, okay, we'll accept the 21.4. Now as we work on our 2050 comp plan, we can plan our development to slow it down and, build a plan that says we reach that. But if our residents come in during that process and say, no, we want to see continuing growth, well, maybe we have an opportunity to up it. It gives us a chance to get their input and say we can keep it in that 21.4 range through 2040 because that's what the Met Council will allow us, or we can, have more growth if that's what the community wants. It's part of that discussion we would have. I just think the 20.4 is a no-brainer at this point.
Can the Met Council,
Whether we get more than that is part of our planning.
can the Met Council keep moving that goalpost, so to speak, on what our population range should be at? Cause I know that was it 18.9 was where they want us to be for 2040, 2050? So.
Before they suggested the recommended amendments.
So could they keep pushing that, 2060, 2070, could they keep pushing that to that 35,000? Or once we hit 21,000, we've hit the Met Council's goal, and now we can slow down construction with houses here? Does that make sense?
But they could and will keep going up, I assume.
So
I
I
have
think
an
their
answer, but I think I would like staff to answer that one.
I can answer partly, I think Nathan
Yeah.
wants to answer too, but if the
Yeah.
MUSA doesn't expand, it will be built out, and then you're basically looking at rural development. And then it's a question of, when they do the 2060-70 plan, are they gonna require MUSA expansion, so.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I'll first say that, and then I wanted to underscore something Jason said earlier. So what we have seen in the last two comp plan cycles is that density requirements for communities have risen. So 2040, the requirement was for Lake Elmo in developing areas within the MUSA to be at 3.0 units per acre. And now you're required to be at 3.5. So you're seeing over time, the required density for this area of the metro is increasing. And so I guess it could stay the same, it could go down, but what we have seen is that it's going up, and I think we might expect that that might continue as well. So that might be reasonable to expect. So that is one thing. I just wanted to underscore the comment about the forecasts being used for wastewater planning, particularly the Met Council's wastewater staff use these forecasts to plan for capital improvement projects to the regional interceptors. And so we had the situation with High Point where, because the Met Council frankly was behind on projects that, from my standpoint as a planner, I would have liked them to be way further ahead on. Because they were behind, there was not enough capacity for the city to add a project in that was a good project, or at least that could be, considered to be a good project. And so I think you'll want to consider that if in your discussion, for reasons that it might be prudent to kind of land the plane with the density kind of with 2040 numbers, is just that there have been kind of expectations on the capital improvement side for where the community will be at. And yeah, so I think that's just important, because you can't just snap your fingers and have sewer capacity if the city decides to approve a project and you don't have the forecast to support it. So that would be a big concern I would have. And I think the other piece is just the land supply that Jason built into this is, I think that's why this feels right. It's just, it takes into account like what land's available within the MUSA. And I think you would reasonably expect your 2050 number, kind of as Jason said, to be in that range between 22 to 25,000, just based on there not being a ton of land that would develop between 24 or beyond 2040.
And that 25 is also based on land use policy too. So if, you increase density and the numbers change, that's where that could come into.
Because technically, if they increased it in their 2060 plan to 4.0.
Yep.
In our areas that we have MUSA, it then adds to it.
Yes, but
That's
it's
what-
also a scenario where we're running out of land in the MUSA where it could be built out by 2040.
The other issue with water is, the DNR, when we're looking at allocations, and that's, you guys are well versed in that, our 472 million gallons is based on 7590. They're looking at, and they don't want to do allocations on a yearly basis. They want to make an allocation for what's out here for 10 or 15 years. If we all of a sudden say we want to have a 2050 number of 18.9, you probably are going to run out of water because you won't have the allocation when you go past that number. That would be a real concern of mine. I'd rather have a bigger allocation and not use it than have an allocation that stops and all of a sudden, what do you do?
No, there's in that hypothetical, because there are a lot of cities that do that. Their allocation is something that was created 15 years ago based upon a long-term projection that you make the request, hey, our new 2050 number is 21,400. Now let's do the math with this horrible court case and do it at 7590. Make the formula, here's your appropriation.
So they weren't willing to, with their amendments, give a 2050 number? Am I thinking of that correct? It would,
That's correct.
or,
My understanding is because there isn't a 2050 number in the 2040 plan, this is a way to amend the 2040 plan to a more accurate number while we have the time, ability to make an amendment.
I mean, do you think they would be open to the 2050 number being 21,400, like you said, where, that's kind of where it is right now? The 2040 number is 19,800. So, yeah, we're not getting their original 18,900, but we're also saying, hey, we're not gonna go above 21,400. They're giving us an opportunity to slow down our development, which we've asked for years. And I can't imagine trying to get at least something.
I
as
think
a
to
result
slow
of
down
this.
development, if you wanted it to end at 21,400 by 2050, then you would just have the development phased in and land uses match that projection, if that's the
We'd have
direction.
time to do that with the Imagine 2050 and make those changes to the land use.
Right, so if you amend it and everything goes based on what they've told us, the 21.4 would be the number for 2040. You would have a 2050 number that would default to 21.4. And then the decision is whether you hold back land in phasing. You could build out to the 21.4. You could phase everything almost in a current phase and just build it to 21.4 and kind of stop there. You could phase it out and know that you can't really meet 21.4 because you changed land use guidance and phasing, and if you don't allow the phasing to move up, then they're gonna hit a limit within that 2040 timeframe, if that makes sense. I hope that's clear.
No, I think that does. I just don't know if maybe I'm not saying this right too, though, because like I'm wondering if their original number, 18,900 for 2050. The recommended amendment was, hey, we're not even gonna give you a number for 2050. Technically, it's gonna be the 21,400, but we're not gonna even give you a number. We're gonna reconsider that number after the White Bear Lake situation is figured out. Would they be open to an amendment where 2030 is 19,200, 2040 is, I'm just gonna make this up, 20,500, and 2050 is 21,400? So instead of us having to risk this number going up further after the White Bear Lake case is figured out and going from 21,400 in 2040 to now they say, okay, hey, White Bear Lake is figured out, you guys can have as much water as you want. We want you to get to 25,000 now. Now we've at least taken an opportunity to
Cap.
slow down the growth.
Cap it.
And because I go back to like, I mean, my main frustration with this is why do we have to, I know some of the answers to this, but why do we have to be told when to develop, how to develop from a different level? The city should decide that, right? Development should happen when development needs to happen or wants to happen. Having someone else come into our local community and tell us how to develop it. Now, yes, I understand the shared resources, et cetera, but we fought really hard saying we don't want that. We want to slow this growth down. So I think if we're given an opportunity to minimize that, I think we have to take whatever we can get with it. And I'd rather err on the side of going too low and, asking for more down the road.
So what I'm hearing is for the 2030 no matter what, yeah, the 19.2 seems practical. And I would like to add, I think we need to use that as a discussion point with the DNR, and the 19.2 is what we asked for on a 7590, because that would be far more of appropriation than what we have now, especially since we know we can show to them the properties that are already in agreement. 21.4, start to do maybe discussions as to how we can maybe slow things in terms of additional phasing in the comp plan. Is that along the lines of what you were thinking? But either way, it's still at 21.4, to Councilmember Jarosich's point, and to my point as well. I do have concerns about the impacts to the utilities and the revenue streams, but it seems like that we're overall on the same page. It's just maybe the details of it. But yeah, if there are tools to help slow it, but absolutely the 19.2 and the 21.4, and if there are ways that we can cap and slow, we should look into those.
So one thing I just want to bring up, though, is the 2030 19,200. I'm just showing this slide. That would be a 10-year, if you were trying to slow it from the 21.4 and reduce it at 2040, that's only roughly 1,000 units in 10 years.
It would be a
So
drastic
it would be-
emergency break.
It almost would make more sense to build it out, and get the revenue and start getting the tax base and have a plan to say, this is where we want to stop if this is the direction you want to take, as opposed to slowing it down and then getting to like 50 units a year when we could just build it to the way you want it, and then you have your tax revenue, and, you know, this could be built out and locked in at 21.4.
So what, you're saying go for the 21.4 at 2030?
No, I'm saying make sure, like, I wouldn't try to have a 2050 at 21.4 and then try to bring the 2040 down, if that makes sense. I believe that was the discussion. So I think it makes sense to have the 1920, because we're close to that in terms of where we're headed. Go forward with the 21.4. And then if you don't want more growth, you would have that 21.4 planned for the entire MUSA, if that's the direction you want to take.
So we could ask for the amendment to say, hey, we actually do want you to include for 2050, we want you to include our number is 21,400. Please don't leave it blank.
That's what I'm
pending
hearing.
White Bear Lake.
So that's what I'm
Essentially,
hearing
I think
from,
that's your solution
if
then.
that's what I'm hearing is your solution. If it's, we don't want to grow, then at least we would align the numbers to where we think we're going. It would give us time to modify the land use. It could look at phasing and just figure that out, and then you would basically end with 21.4, if that's what the council wanted to do. We haven't done a study in terms of how that would affect the city's finances, but that,
That'd be pretty close to what the full development from the 2040 comp plan though, right? Like that would be
yes.
within 800 of that.
If I can add why that might make some sense as well, is just that you would have an adopted comp plan that's in effect between 2030 and 2040 when most of that growth is occurring. So you will have less, you know, in this hypothetical scenario, you would have less vacant land when you're preparing your 2060 comp plan that would be potentially needing to get guided at a higher density. So
Help protect
if you're
us
tracking,
from that.
right, so if you're, you know, if you're really, if the goal is to kind of, I'll call it land the plane, but like, you know, get to that end goal, I think getting the development, if it can and will occur, getting it now does make some sense just from that numbers perspective.
It's better for us to do it at 3 or 3.5 per acre than potentially 4 or 4.5 an acre down the road, which would really tick people off.
That's where the Met Council they actually started at 4 units per acre this cycle, and so many communities voiced their concern. Folks like Nicole and Jason were reaching out to the Met Council that they ended up moving it back to 3.5.
Gotcha. Do you need further feedback from Councilman Jerry?
The only other thing I would add is, you know, there's an article in the Strib, they're back at that increasing density in existing cities bill in the legislature, allowing the, what do you call it, accessory dwelling units and things like that, and that could affect our plan. I mean, you know, when you build a mother-in-law apartment in your backyard, your mother-in-law moves in, it can affect that plan.
Not happening. Not happening. Do you need further feedback from us at this time?
Gotta be careful here.
Sending her a letter.
Yeah.
So I think just clarification as we move forward, because we are working on the comp plan, we will start that. So the alternative forecast number, you do not want to use that and just use the 21.4 currently as the 2050 number?
And identify the 2050 as 21.4 as well, and that we talk with the DNR using 19.2 for an appropriation.
Okay.
Since we can now show, because of the data that came from this, we can show that that's a number.
Again, I think that is great. Again, I just want to be clear, if there is any way that we could get that 21.4 number down closer to the number they are offering us, I think we should take whatever measure we can. So if, again, you know, based off of those predictions, by 2030, we're already close to that 19,000 number. You know, is there a way to bring that 21,400 number down to 20,500? You know, I am having a hard time figuring out how I'm going to explain this to people who come up and ask me, hey, you had an opportunity to drop the number. And, you know, I think we're taking steps to try to mitigate it going higher, which I think is great. If there is any other way to drop that lower, you know, and if that means we have to make amendments and change land use sooner than later, like, I would like to do that, but maybe it's just not possible.
I think the challenge to that is that we approached them with data and said, these are real numbers, right? And this is what we think we're going to. We're talking about very minimal, I mean, I think it'd be difficult. I mean, if you want to reduce 500 people, I don't know what the rationale is. I think like they've given us an option to kind of work this into a very
I think maybe
workable
like,
range, and then, you know, if we were to say, well, our numbers are showing this is the density, what could happen is we could either just end up with just areas that are commercial business park where you wouldn't want them. Like, that's what we are talking about, like, with, in terms of land use guidance, so. I don't know, this is what they are using their projections, household averages,
What I would answer
know.
to that resident, because yeah, we'll get the question, absolutely, as the question should be raised. A response that I would provide is, number one, because I've had this statement come up, oh, you have to meet this population. No, you don't. It's, the zoning has to provide for that possible population, but our densities have so much of a range in each zone. 21.4 is just a number within those ranges. It could end up being 19,000 based upon what gets approved, because what came in, now obviously developers come in and want the most, right? And then maybe density bonus. But my response to them would be, we can't, that's a number, but the ranges within each zone still, it's a give or take probably 1,000.
So I think that begs the question, is if that's something you want to do in terms of giving us a range that we can work on when we move forward, because we have to establish land use guidance and density ranges, we can tell you there's this many developable acres, this is the range, and this is what we should expect. There are some issues of netting that get complicated with stormwater ponds, so it's very difficult to get like exact, but if we could work in a range for that 2040 number, 2050 number.
I mean, can both of those be a range of 20 to 21.4? If it, because again, our densities allow for that range anyways, so it's just codifying what already exists. It's not,
And we'll know that too, if we can't meet 20 because the density doesn't line up, 3.5, we would come back to you and say, well, the lowest that we can really do is this number. Do you want to take a parcel that you really believe should be residential and just make it commercial, and it doesn't really make sense? I mean, that's kind of the challenge with the population.
thoughts?
yeah, I mean, I think that may be the best compromise that we can really come with. You know, again, I just
Put like a range in
a
there?
range in there. I just, one maybe point that I just want to make here as well is like, I know sometimes these numbers, when we say, oh, hey, we're only going from 21,400 to 21,000, like what's the, why does that even matter? Well, you know, in an 800 unit development of quarter acre lots, that could be 400 half acre lots, right? So it does make a big difference in what we're talking about as far as like from a development standpoint.
For the type,
And that
yeah.
was a huge pushback when this originally came up with the Met Council, where we had to increase the population density, where people were saying, well, hey, like, you know, Lake Elmo, it fits these 1 acre lots. I can't believe we're going from 2 to 1. I can't believe we're going from 1 to half. I can't believe we're going from half to a quarter. And so, yes, it may not seem like a lot when we say, you know, only 400 less, but that is a big difference in a development that's going to go in. Now we're saying, hey, you can develop 400 homes here instead of 800 homes. And that's a big difference. So I think that sometimes when you have these large numbers, it can be like, well, what does that even mean? That can mean a pretty big difference of somebody's neighborhood that's going in next to them of what that looks like.
What if they're all in 4-story apartment buildings?
Yeah.
Assuming they're all going to be single family, right? They're all in 4-story apartment buildings, you know, not an issue.
I think we have covered. So what I'm hearing is if we can get a range in there, Councilmember Hearn will take you golfing.
Okay. I tried.
Legion Avenue Properties. Yeah, there was a fire there. There was a big fire. I don't know if you saw it.
Successful fire.
Yeah.
Successful.
While this is being pulled up, for those watching, yes, the fire department did an amazing job. We were out there on Saturday. It was well attended, it was responsible, it was safe, and it was amazing.
Council, the Valley Branch Watershed District is one of 3 watersheds that serve the city of Lake Elmo. Legion Pond, which is adjacent to Legion Avenue, is a 17-acre body of water without an outlet. Over the last 10 years, the Valley Branch has done several amendments to improve the shoreline to minimize flooding in these properties. As a result of an evaluation that was done about 5 years ago, the Valley Branch has acquired 5 properties along Legion Avenue due to high water flooding that impacted the homes. They have since hired a contractor to remove the homes which will occur in 2026. 4 homes along Legion Avenue are scheduled to be removed this month into May, and the 5th is expected to be removed later this summer. The Valley Branch intends to restore the site by preserving as many of the existing trees as possible and planting native grasses around the area. Following a 1-year to 3-year monitoring of that shoreline, they plan to turn it over. The district is offering the property to the city for potential use as a public amenity or open space. If the city declines, the district plans to sell the parcels on public auction with conservation easements which will restrict any building on those sites. If the city chooses to acquire the property, they may set conditions with the agreement that would benefit the area in the future for the outlook. So if that would include just, right-of-way access to it, just preserving it for the future to come. Concept plans that were provided by the Valley Branch Watershed District show just an overall view of what it could look like, with some of those amendments that we looking as the city to impose on that, would just be, some of those things that we could view, that could be a view of this property forthcoming. One of the conditions that are of a concern to the city is the right-of-way area in there. If we do not select to take any of the properties, or we select just to take one or none, staff did meet with the engineering department, and the final property on the far right, is it of interest to the city for the purpose of improving that cul-de-sac area? Right now, it is a T-bone intersection, and staff does believe that improving that to a cul-de-sac would benefit traffic flow through that area, especially for emergency vehicles. Additionally to that, to the south of that is additional property that is owned by the city that goes out to a wide open parcel. Just working with city staff and our planning department, we have looked at that as a possible access or entryway from actually the golf course area as a trail connection point to downtown. Currently, we have a lot of complaints I shouldn't say complaints, more concerns of people walking down Lake Elmo Avenue where there isn't a sidewalk for a good portion of that. And this would possibly be a trail connection or an access way from the golf course area down to Blue Legion area, to the Reed area, where there's actually sidewalks on 30th to get you to the downtown area. So staff is looking for direction from city council in regards to if they're interested in acquiring their properties, if that involves future discussions with the watershed district to acquiring their properties, or if it's just one or none at all, they would just sell the properties. Fiscal impacts to the city, they are willing to give the property to the city. They're more interested in giving all of the property to the city versus just selecting one or none. For the purposes of, they could really restore that wetland area fully, and really prep it for future growth as far as native grasses and things like that. Individually selling those properties off is a concern of theirs because that new homeowner although would be in agreement for no building there, maybe subject to doing additional mowing in areas where they want to preserve that wetland area. So,
Have they, so in these discussions, the cost for them restoring, that's on them?
correct.
And are there options for, watershed is watershed, like they have to follow the regulations. How much wiggle room is there for what that looks like? Obviously, they're wonderful image here, but I assume there's probably not too many options here in terms of what can and cannot be done for how that restoration looks like.
Yeah, that restoration is gonna be pretty native, right? So, I did speak with, Bar Engineering. They did indicate, like, you're gonna be restricted to like the trees, very limited building at all. Maybe a park bench or two. Even the trail is likely gonna be a mowable area, not bituminous or any type of gravel. Washouts do occur, they would suggest mulch in those areas, right? So I think we would be limited on future of that, if it'd be wildflowers, it'd be nature preserve, it'd be more of a visible viewing area, if anything.
Because that was gonna be my question in terms of, it's not gonna have active things. We're not putting a pickleball court there.
Correct.
But in terms of, if you're there for viewing a bench, obviously that is on concrete and that's impervious surface. Is that an issue?
Yeah, no, that's something that we could definitely work with them if it's limited in size, a bench size, we limit those to 3 by 6, right, just for footing purposes.
Because I could see like maybe a bench and or a picnic table, not shade structure that's 18 by 20, but, because if I was in the neighborhood, I would foresee this as, yes, this is a place you are out and hanging out for literally an hour or two because you're just sitting there next to it's a really cool looking, it's a lake, but it's a pond. It is very cool looking, and it would be very tranquil, especially if they're doing those prairie grasses and restoration.
Can we not have a shaded structure there?
My thought was just because it's additional impervious because of the
Got it.
concrete slab and.
Okay.
So I'll just say straight up, I think it would be all parcels, do it all at once, but they do all the restoration. I just have additional thoughts regarding, because that 0.3 acres that the city owns to the south and the trail connection, I think that is a very good conversation, but that's additional above and beyond that. I fully support all this. I had a resident ask when I was out there, yeah, I heard the city's looking at putting a townhouse there. I'm like, no, you didn't. No, nope. But I something along these lines, yes, I think is brilliant. And I was talking with the homeowner who was right there at Al Kupperschmidt. He was a fireman for over 20 years for Lake Elmo Fire Department. And his description was Legion Pond. When his kids were growing up, you could literally walk in it and you'd be at knee height in the middle of it. But it's gotten deeper over the last couple of decades as there's been more impervious around the area, as the thing has increased in how much it floods each time, and it just hasn't lost as much water. And it's one of our landlocked basins, but it has changed tremendously. And now it is an asset in that regard, but I will stop. I said my 2 cents.
How's this fit into the park plan that we did recently? Is anything mentioned in there?
So, one of the things that was mentioned in there, and Mayor Caden had brought it up maybe at our last, actually, meeting. He's like, has the city ever thought about selling parkland, right? And one of the things that does come up on our Parks Master Plan is like, we do have a number of properties throughout the community, in some of our developments, that are on the backside of properties that aren't developed. They're small, they're not able to be incorporated into anything, if it's a play structure or anything like that. One thing unique with this one, it's gonna be more your nature, your sightseeing, things like that, of more of a passerby, if you look at those features of that trail connection, things like that. But yes, Councilmember Dragisich, going back to your question, the Parks Master Plan looks more at like minimizing or not taking on properties that are this small in size, if they have no value.
I still think we should take it on, by the way. I just didn't know where it fit in,
Thoughts?
I think it's great. Can you explain again who would be, I thought you said something about certain residents taking care of like the mowing of the properties and stuff like that. Can you explain that again?
Yeah, so only if they were to sell it off individually. If they were to sell
Got it.
off these lots or they put them on a public site, likely they'd be bought up by 1, 2, maybe 5 different people, right?
Sure.
And so then they would all have their little mowing plan and things like that. They'd all be separate, and you'd have people driving down there likely.
And they
trying to
wouldn't
acquire-
even be able to put a business on there, it would be unbuildable?
It's not buildable, either by the city or by additional property owners. So anybody else that buys it, they'd be restricted to the same conditions.
Okay.
You might have 5 boardwalks out there at some point, you know, if it was sold off individually, but, still be restricted to the same things that we would.
And does Public Works have the bandwidth FTE wise to take care of a property like this? Do we would need to hire a seasonal person, or how would that work?
So with a concept like this, there'd be very minimal,
Yeah,
very minimal. Our mowing contractor currently mows our lift station down, just to the north of this park, or this proposed area. Likely they would do any type of mowing if we did do anything there. Likely it'd just be right along the curb edge to make a curb appeal,
sure.
as well as that mowed trail potentially. That would be about it. Additional trees could be planted in there. We can make that a recommendation possibly, but otherwise we, as the Parks Commission, that's one of their philosophies, to continue adding trees to some of our open space or our park areas.
And this is probably way further down the road, but I see some canoes in there. Those be city-owned? Do we
So,
have rental?
Yeah, this is just a concept again, that's
Sure.
just something they kind of threw out there as like, hey, potential of what could happen there. A canoe area is not a permanent structure, so that's kind of a concept they threw there, so. Very quick concept.
Are the large trees identified on that, are those the ones that already exist on the properties?
Several of them are. Some of them closer to the curb are newly transplanted ones, but most of those are current ones that are
All right.
there. Yep.
Because I was just, my 2 cents would also be not to plant any additional trees that are gonna be large, because the homeowners on the east side of the street now are like, we now can see the lake. And that's a fantastic view for them, so I wouldn't want to be adding any additional trees that would limit that view.
Yeah.
Unless they're like the miniature 3-foot ones that are just for cool, but that would not fit in this area anyways.
Yeah, I think this completely makes sense to do. $500 at the most,
Yeah,
this is-
that's
looks like what
crazy.
we'd spend for this. I mean, if the city I think, I'm gonna be careful here. Like I would donate that to buy. I mean, this would be a very nice feature. And obviously this will happen. I can't wait to hear the Parks Commission's feedback and suggestions for this. We already got an email from one of them with some great ideas. And so I just think I assume that would be part of the process, right? Like this would go to Parks Commission and they'd give their suggestions and feedback, because I think they're gonna have a lot of really good feedback and suggestions for this as well, but I definitely am on board with moving forward.
So related, unrelated to that, the 1.8 acres that the city owns on the other side of the houses, on the east side, which used to be the old sewer infrastructure for the system they had 30 years ago. A resident there was asking me about that. How does that fit in our long-term, because it's not a public works site, it's technically an engineering site, but do we have thoughts, like, does it get mowed by the city? Is it an amenity in any way, like?
Yeah, I'll let Jason speak, but we do mow it once a year.
So
what else?
we have the EDA work plan. We're gonna look at all the parcels this year and come up with a plan for each parcel. So basically, should we sell it, should we keep it? If we keep it, why? And then how we should approach selling property, so.
Seeing as it's completely landlocked, there's no connections to it whatsoever. Thank you. Do you need further feedback from us
No, I think I
on
got
this
good.
amazing idea that's very affordable?
Thank you.
Thank you. Future agenda items, Ms. Miller.
We did have a change, our engineer sent out today, so, I don't have it pulled up right now, but I do know we went over it earlier, and so it looks like the only thing that'll be on the regular agenda will be the quarterly goals update, and then a few consent items, so right now it looks to be pretty light agenda.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Above and beyond that, it's time to go home. We are adjourned at 8:50. Happy birthday, Mayor.